In the autumn of 1944, one of the oldest regions of Germany stood on the edge of a transformation few of its inhabitants could fully comprehend. For generations, East Prussia had been portrayed as a distant but integral part of the German state, a land of farms, market towns, ports, and historic cities linked by a strong regional identity. Yet as the Second World War entered its final phase, the advance of the Soviet army towards Germany's eastern frontier triggered a chain of events that would unravel the social fabric of the province. Long before the fighting reached every town and village, fear, uncertainty, and the collapse of authority began reshaping daily life. What followed was not simply a military defeat. It was the disintegration of an entire regional society under the pressure of war, mass flight, and the breakdown of institutions that had once seemed permanent. East Prussia occupied a unique position within Germany. Separated from the rest of the country by the Polish corridor after the First World War, it developed a strong sense of distinctiveness while remaining deeply connected to German political and cultural life. Its landscape consisted of agricultural estates, forests, lakes, and historic urban centers such as Königsberg. For decades, its residents had experienced political upheaval, economic difficulties, and changing borders. Yet the foundations of society remained largely intact. Families expected to spend their lives in familiar communities. Local governments functioned, schools operated. Religious institutions provided continuity. Despite the immense disruptions caused by the Second World War, many civilians still believed that their homes and communities would endure. The military situation began to change dramatically in 1944. Following a series of major Soviet offensives, German forces suffered severe setbacks across the Eastern Front. During the summer, Soviet advances destroyed large formations and pushed westward at a pace that alarmed military planners. The destruction of German Army Group Center during Operation Bagration marked a turning point. Suddenly, territories that had once seemed distant from the fighting found themselves increasingly exposed. East Prussia, long presented as a secure homeland far behind the front, was now approaching the zone of direct military danger. As Soviet forces advanced closer to Germany's eastern borders, reports from the front spread rapidly among civilians. Information came through official channels, military personnel returning from combat zones, letters from relatives, and rumors circulating through towns and villages. Many reports were incomplete or contradictory. Some people expected German defenses to stabilize the situation. Others feared that the war was moving irreversibly toward German territory. The uncertainty itself became a source of anxiety. Daily routines continued, but confidence in the future steadily weakened. The Nazi leadership faced a difficult dilemma. On one hand, maintaining civilian morale required projecting confidence and discouraging panic. On the other hand, military realities increasingly suggested that parts of eastern Germany could soon become battlefields. Local officials often received unclear instructions. Evacuation planning existed in some areas, but implementation was inconsistent. Many authorities hesitated to authorize large-scale civilian departures because they feared undermining public confidence or disrupting military logistics. As a result, preparations frequently lagged behind events unfolding at the front. The first major shock came when Soviet forces entered parts of East Prussia in late 1944. Although German counterattacks temporarily restored portions of the frontier, the psychological impact was profound. For the first time, many civilians realized that the war had reached German soil. News of fighting inside East Prussia spread quickly. Stories of destruction, displacement, and military retreat reinforced growing fears that established assumptions about safety no longer applied. During these months, society began showing signs of strain. Transportation networks became increasingly congested. Railways carried military supplies, wounded soldiers, refugees, and administrative personnel. Civilian travel became more difficult. Fuel shortages affected transportation and agriculture. Local administrations struggled to balance normal responsibilities with emergency demands. Schools experienced disruptions. Economic activity increasingly reflected wartime priorities rather than local needs. Families faced difficult decisions. Some considered leaving while transportation remained available. Others chose to stay, either because they trusted official assurances or because departure seemed impossible. Elderly residents often hesitated to abandon homes they had occupied for decades. Farmers worried about livestock, equipment, and harvests. Many families lacked clear destinations if they left. The prospect of abandoning property accumulated over generations created powerful emotional resistance. As winter approached, the military situation deteriorated further. In January 1945, the Soviet East Prussian offensive began on a massive scale. German defenses came under intense pressure across a broad front. The scale and speed of the offensive overwhelmed existing evacuation plans. Large numbers of civilians suddenly attempted to leave at the same time, producing scenes of confusion throughout the province. Roads became crowded with people moving westward. Horse-drawn wagons carried families and possessions through severe winter conditions. Vehicles shared limited routes with military traffic. Snow, ice, and freezing temperatures added to the difficulties. Many refugees traveled long distances with inadequate supplies. What had begun as a managed evacuation effort in some districts increasingly became a desperate attempt to escape advancing combat zones. The breakdown of normal administration accelerated the crisis. Local officials often found themselves confronting situations beyond their capacity to control. Communications became unreliable. Orders arrived late or conflicted with changing military realities. Institutions that had once organized community life struggled to function. In many places, decision-making shifted from established procedures to improvised responses driven by immediate necessity. One of the most significant features of the East Prussian collapse was the speed with which familiar structures lost effectiveness. Civilian populations had long relied on local authorities, transportation systems, public services, and military protection. As these systems became overwhelmed, individuals and families increasingly depended on personal networks and their own judgment. Communities that had once operated through stable institutions found themselves navigating uncertainty with limited guidance. The separation of families became increasingly common. Military service had already removed many men from civilian life. During evacuation and flight, additional separations occurred. Relatives traveling on different routes lost contact. Children became separated from parents. Communication difficulties made reunification uncertain. The emotional consequences extended far beyond the immediate challenges of displacement. Urban centers faced particular pressures. Königsberg, the provincial capital, became increasingly isolated as Soviet forces advanced. Air raids, artillery bombardment, and the disruption of supply networks complicated civilian survival. Administrative functions continued in reduced form, but the city's ability to serve as a center of regional organization steadily declined. As transportation links deteriorated, coordination across the province became increasingly difficult. The evacuation across the Baltic Sea emerged as one of the most important aspects of the civilian exodus. German naval and civilian vessels transported large numbers of refugees from ports along the Baltic coast. These operations represented a major effort to move civilians away from advancing combat zones. Despite significant logistical achievements, the scale of demand exceeded available capacity. Many people waited for transportation that never arrived. Others undertook dangerous journeys in hopes of reaching evacuation points. The winter conditions magnified every challenge. Refugees often traveled through extreme cold while carrying limited food and supplies. Shelter was scarce in many areas. Illness and exhaustion became widespread concerns. Even those who successfully escaped immediate danger frequently faced prolonged hardship. The collapse of local economic systems made obtaining necessities increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, military developments continued reducing the space available for civilian movement. Soviet forces gradually isolated portions of East Prussia, trapping both military units and civilian populations. Areas that had once seemed connected to evacuation routes found themselves cut off. Each new encirclement created additional uncertainty about who could still escape and who would remain behind. The social consequences extended beyond physical displacement. East Prussian society had been built upon long-established relationships connecting families, villages, churches, schools, businesses, and local governments. Flight disrupted these connections on a massive scale. Entire communities dispersed across different regions. Shared local identities weakened as people found themselves scattered among unfamiliar populations elsewhere in Germany. Property loss further contributed to the sense of societal collapse. Many refugees left with only a small fraction of their possessions. Homes, farms, businesses, and community institutions were abandoned. While military defeat represented one dimension of the crisis, the disappearance of familiar social and economic foundations carried equally profound significance for those affected. People were not merely losing territory. They were losing the physical settings around which their lives had been organized. As Soviet forces secured control over larger portions of the province, the possibility of returning home became increasingly remote. During earlier phases of the war, many displaced civilians had assumed that military developments might eventually permit their return. By 1945, such expectations became progressively less realistic. The geopolitical transformation of Eastern Europe was beginning to reshape the future of the region itself. The end of the war did not reverse these developments. Instead, it confirmed them. East Prussia ceased to exist as a German province. Its territory was divided between new political authorities, fundamentally altering the map of the region. The population that had once formed the core of East Prussian society was largely dispersed. For millions of people across post-war Germany, memories of towns, villages, and landscapes in the East became part of a lost world that no longer existed in its previous form. The long-term consequences extended across decades. Former East Prussians resettled in different parts of Germany and elsewhere. They rebuilt lives under new circumstances, but many retained strong connections to their regional heritage. Associations, publications, and family traditions preserved memories of communities that had disappeared. At the same time, younger generations grew up far from the places that had shaped their parents' and grandparents' identities. Historians examining the collapse of East Prussia emphasize that it cannot be understood solely through military events. The advance of armies was undeniably central. But the broader story involves the breakdown of institutions, the disruption of social networks, and the transformation of everyday life under extraordinary pressure. The province's fate illustrates how modern warfare affects entire societies, not only combatants. Administrative systems, transportation networks, economic structures, and local communities all became part of the larger crisis. The events of 1944 and 1945 also demonstrate how quickly seemingly stable social orders can unravel when confronted by overwhelming external forces. For decades, East Prussian society had survived political change, economic challenges, and previous conflicts. Yet, within a relatively short period, the combined effects of military defeat, mass displacement, and geopolitical transformation dismantled structures that many residents had assumed would endure indefinitely. By the time the fighting ended, the collapse was complete. The roads crowded with refugees, the abandoned villages, the disrupted families, and the dissolved institutions all reflected a process that had begun before the front arrived and continued long after it passed. What disappeared was more than a province on a map. A complex regional society, shaped over generations, lost the conditions that had sustained its existence. The story of East Prussia's final months remains significant because it reveals the human dimensions of historical transformation on a vast scale. Military campaigns altered borders and governments, but they also reshaped the lives of ordinary people whose communities were caught in the path of events beyond their control. The collapse of East Prussian society stands as a reminder that the end of a war is often more than the conclusion of military operations. It can also mark the disappearance of entire social worlds, leaving behind memories, records, and traditions, as the principal links to a past that can no longer be restored.